Our next speaker is known to many of you, so well known that he didn't bother to send me a bio. So I am simply going to introduce Gregg Ingersoll and ask him to give a little bit of background for him and his present position, and then address the crowd. Thank you, Gregg.
Thank you very much. It's great to be here. It's a beautiful facility. I'm kind of envious when I see this nice boardroom they have here. The little room that we have is kind of tight, but we'll work on that. It's great to be here. I looked down, I was sitting there in my shoes. I must have stepped in the mud somewhere. My father's 92, and he'd be very disappointed because clean shoes and public speaking to him would just be not something. You wouldn't show up with dirty shoes to speak in public, so I won't tell him that happened today. I was thinking about my father. He's 92, and he can still... He's a little shaky now, but his handwriting still looks like calligraphy. Like, it's just beautiful. And he was a fisherman, and I'm a school superintendent. You can hardly read my handwriting. So what's going on there, right? There's a story in there somewhere about how education has changed and how, what's important and so on in today's world. Thank you very much. I enjoyed hearing Chris talk, and I've heard him speak several times, and about he's got a great vision for where we need to go in education. It certainly does fit well with what's happening here in Sackville with the group of people here who are trying to change the way that we think about how we do educational planning and how we do work with communities and do work in schools and so on. So that's exciting. I'll talk about that a little bit more in a second. I think in 1995 in the world something happened, right? There was a big change in 1995, and that was when the internet came online in 1995. And shortly thereafter, around the year 2000, universities started completely revamping their courses. Textbooks had to be rewritten. Educational textbooks had to be all redone through the lens of technology and through the lens of communication, because it changed everything. It changed the world. And I look back on that time in New Brunswick, and I don't remember a big revolution happening in education in 1995. I don't remember one happening in 2000 or 2005. Or even 2010, right? So we're a little slow catching up to the revolution as it happens in education in the world. But we need to catch up. We've been talking about 21st century learning since before the 21st century. We're almost a quarter way through it now. We'll be talking about the 22nd century pretty soon. So it's time that we started thinking about what we're doing and changing what we're doing. I think there's a lot of great things happening. And in our schools, the teachers are doing some very creative things, very interesting things are happening. But most of the innovative things are happening kind of on the edge, on the fringe. It's not part of our mainstream what we're doing, because the funding and the way we're set up and the way we deliver outcomes and our curriculum is not designed through that lens. And if you're going to teach things through the lens of students understanding the greater world they live in and how the subject they're learning is going to help them be a better citizen or exist in that world, you have to shift the way that we deliver curriculum. It's not just I'm going to teach you this outcome because it's a curriculum outcome in this subject and you have to learn it, and don't ask me why, because I had to learn it and my parents had to learn it, we all had to learn it. And there is a certain part of it that we're trying to grow their brain and make them better thinkers and so on. But kids today are going to need relevance in their lives and in their education if they're going to be interested. And Chris showed you a couple of slides, of showing how the interest of students. I mean, I have a PowerPoint of my own that has similar ones from the United States and even from our own Tell Them From Me data that we collect from our own students that shows interest and motivation, dropping off as they get into the years where they really should be challenged academically, upper middle school and into high school. And there's even a lot of research that says the graphs for teachers look the same, right? Teachers are losing their interest in what they're doing, right? They want to do something different too, right? Because the kids in front of them are coming to them from a technological world and sitting in a classroom where there's no technology, right? So it's almost like a foreign place for them to go into a classroom where the technology is not there. So we need to find a way to bring that into our schools, right? But we know that some of the uses that kids use technology for is not a productive use. We need to shift that, right? And even when we talk to some schools, we've done a few projects where we want to bring maybe iPads into the classroom or something. One of the first concerns parents have is, well, my kids got their face in that thing all the time now. I don't want them doing it when they're at school too, right? And we have to try to convince them, yes, but we're going to shift the use of that electronic device, how we're going to use it for an educational purpose versus what you see them doing in their spare time when they have their own device or they're playing their video games. But we know that it's not just technology. A few weeks ago, you guys had a video of, of an innovative school in California, High Tech High. And High Tech High, even though it's called High Tech High, is not known for its technology. It's known for the way they teach kids, right? The innovative ways that students learn in that school. And they've opened it up, and it's very creative in the way they do things. And there is technology there, but it's not all about technology. You can see some parts in that video where you don't even see technology, right? So it's about how you teach students and about how you involve them in what's going on, right? So how are we going to make that shift? So in New Brunswick, we have to think about that. And Michael Fullen is an educator a researcher from Canada that we're following a lot, and he developed a new group called New Pedagogy for Deep Learning. And in that model, he talks about the shift from the way we used to teach in school, or maybe we still do to some extent, where the teacher is the one with all the knowledge, right? They teach the kids what they know, and they expect the kids to regurgitate that back to them the same way that they taught it to them. And if you do that well, then you do well in school, right? And those of us that were pretty good in school had a pretty easy time with that, and that was good. We liked school, but we could do that very well, right? But the shift that has to happen is that the teacher is part of the sharing of the knowledge, right? The facilitator, but they use technology to help them deliver that, and the students use what they learn and apply it. There's an application of what they learn. They don't just regurgitate it back. They have to understand it, but they have to apply it and show real-life application. So how do you do that if all you have in front of you is just a textbook, right, and a piece of paper? You have to find innovative ways to do that. And you don't have to have technology to do it, but certainly in a place like New Brunswick, if we want to level the playing field and be on par with other parts of the world, technology will open that world up for our kids, right? And because if you live in California, or you live in Montreal, or you live in Japan, or someplace like that, where there's a lot of technology, is one thing. But in Sackville, New Brunswick, how is a kid here going to learn about all that, especially if their family doesn't travel and doesn't, engage them in those kind of activities? So we need to have access to technology in our schools, and we're working on that. Chris is working on that as well at the provincial level. We need to have it so students at school can access that. And it has to be equitable. We can't just have kids that can afford it, that can have it. We have to have it so everyone has access to it. And again, it's not the be-all and end-all, but we have to shift the way that children have access to learning. And for teachers themselves, teachers are teaching what they're told to teach, right? They have a curriculum, they have a way to teach it, and that's what they're doing, right? If we're going to open things up and say, we want you to teach those outcomes through a 21st century lens, right? And we want you to think about the big picture of what kids need to know when they grow up, as you're teaching those outcomes rather than just teach them, then we have to shift what our expectations are on school. If we say the most important things to us are high literacy scores and high math scores, that's it. We don't measure anything else, we don't count anything else, then that's what they're going to have to do. They're going to have to keep driving those two things and try to show us that the kids are doing well in that. But when that kid, if that's all they do from K to 12 is work on literacy and math, they might do pretty good at it, but when they step up to a job interview, right, when they're 23 years old, and sit down and they start asking about creativity and what are you going to bring to this workforce and how do you communicate and do you know how to collaborate with other people and those kind of things, they're going to say, no, I thought you were going to teach me how to do that, right? So we have to, that's shifting, that the world is shifting, and we have to make sure kids get both those things in school, right? And don't take me wrong, literacy and math are very important, right? But it's not the only important thing in a 21st century education. So we have to start shifting and allowing our schools some freedom to do that. And like I say, we have innovative, some teachers who go out on their own and go after that technology and start doing things like that. And so you saw some of the things that Chris showed you. But we need that to be everywhere, not just pockets of innovation happening here and there. We need to make sure it's available for every teacher to do that. And when we talk about changing it in New Brunswick, and we talk about what the Sackville 2020 group is trying to do, is you can't just change the school itself and expect everything to happen there. There's a whole system here, right? The school is part of a system, right? There's the school, there's the district level, right, kind of a local authority, and then there's the provincial Department of Education, right, who is very close to us in New Brunswick. We're very small, right? In Ontario, where there's 72 school districts, it's a different looking thing, right? They don't have as tight control of the districts. There's 72 Anglophone districts in Ontario. In New Brunswick, there's 4. So we're very close, right? And they're very close to, and we're small, right? In New Brunswick, we have 70,000-ish kids in the English system. that's a medium-sized school district in Ontario, right? So we are relatively small. So that level is there. And then you have the political level in New Brunswick, right? And back, 100 years ago, when we were just starting to get out of those one-room schoolhouses that the mayor mentioned, we needed some government to help us get that going, right? Because some communities had it, some didn't. Some teachers were being paid better in some places than they were others, so we needed the government to help us get that going. We got a good system going now with that. But now, that system, in many ways, is getting in the way of us becoming what it is that 2020 is talking about and what Mr. Treadwell is talking about here today. There's so many layers to that, right? And everybody wants something different. Everyone wants a priority. If we're going to free schools up and free teachers up to teach the way we're talking about, all the layers in the system have to be part of that. And you can't just try to fix one. You can't just say, well, we'll convince the politicians and everything else will fall in place. You can't do that. All the levels have to be in agreement. And there's a group called C21 Canada, which is a kind of a Canadian group that promotes 21st century education, and they put out several documents that talk about those different layers and how important it is that all the layers are in sync. Because if you just try to attack the district level and you don't influence the others will take over. If they don't like what you're doing, they'll come sweeping in and take over and push you back the way you were. And one of the things that I see in everything I read about change in education is our biggest enemy to moving forward is what's happened in the past, right? That's our biggest enemy. We're so locked into our history and the way things have always been that we can't see out of that paradigm to see forward to a new way. And even sometimes I can say, I've seen some of the people in this room have tried to do some innovative things in technology in our system, and we keep running into roadblocks everywhere we go. Well, that policy won't allow you to do it that way. And you can't do it that way because the Purchasing Act won't allow you to buy that way. And there's an act that says parents don't have to bring that to school. And it just everywhere you move, you run into a roadblock, right? And those are all old policies that were written, some of them 20, 40, 50 years ago, right? And they're still holding us up today. So all the systems have to change. So I think what's happening with the group here in Sackville is happening. I'm seeing that around other communities in our district. We had a very bureaucratic way of deciding who gets a new school and what schools look like and so on. It's very bureaucratic, and there's steps, and there's maybe a little place in there and you're building a new school or the parent school support committee might have a little say in it, but that's it. Then other people in the government make all the other decisions. Well, I'm seeing a shift in that where people are no longer willing to accept that anymore. They're saying, if you're going to do something in my community, right, then I want to have a say in what you're doing here, right? We only have so much money to go around in New Brunswick, in our communities, and in the province, that if you're going to build something in our community, why don't we collaborate on that, and maybe we can do 2 or 3 things together to make that happen. So I think that it's going to take, people like yourselves that are saying that we want to have a say in what happens in our community, right? If you're going to do something here, we want to be part of it. Not only just the structure and what you're building, but where it is and how it looks and does it suit the kind of learners that we're sending to school from our homes. All right, and then going forward, what kind of education is going to take place inside that school? When it comes to 21st century learning, we know we can't do it all ourselves. We need partnerships. We need partners that are going to come in to help us understand what's going on in the world, what our kids need to know. We need partners who are going to come with resources to help us do that, because we know that, even with all the money that's spent on education, there's still not enough money to resource all the things we need in schools. So we need partners to help us with that. And those partners need to feel like if they're helping us and coming to help us, that they're getting something in return. Right? So if a company here in Sackville is going to invest into a school and say, I'll help you with this, they want to know that when those kids come out of school, they're going to have some skills that they could use in their industry. Right? That's the kind of trade-off that they're looking for. And that's fair. Right? Why else would you want to be part of that if you didn't think that the kids were going to come out of school either ready to go into post-secondary to learn the skills you need or have the skills that you need to work in this community? So all those things are happening. Many of our administrators and teachers are here today listening, and they all want to be part of that, but they're part of a system that's stuck in the old way of doing things. And as we try to move forward, we keep running into some of those old things, and we're trying to break down those barriers. But people like yourselves here today and the work you're doing are going to help us break those barriers down, because all the different levels need to hear what we're trying to do, right? And we need support as we move forward in that. And I think it's very exciting, the things that can happen, and I'm looking forward to some of the great things that are going to happen, and great things are happening in our schools. Chris Treadwell showed you some examples. I could put up a whole bunch more from our schools, and some right here in Sackville. Some really cool things are happening in schools. But again, we got to keep that going and make that the norm, not just something that happens, at certain times in the year. So we're looking forward to that. So So it's great to be here. I'm very excited what you're trying to do. I say around the district, I was at a parent meeting last night in Riverview, and they're saying the same kind of things. And there was a meeting in down in where's JMA? Help me. Salisbury, thank you. It's been a long day. I was in Fredericton on Monday and Tuesday, so all day Wednesday I was back here. I thought Wednesday was Monday, so I kept telling everyone it's Monday. But anyway, sorry. Yeah, so I was a meeting down there, and they're talking about some new infrastructure there too, and they want to be part of it. And they don't want someone telling them we're going to plunk a school over here, and they want to be part of it too. They don't. The communities, the days have gone by. I think when we rely on other people, communities need to be part of that, right? Because resources are so limited. So it's exciting. I'm looking forward to the work that will be done here, and congratulations on everybody here for coming out today to show an interest in education. We all need to work together. So thank you very much.